Hi, I'm Simon Drew, and you're listening to the Practical Stoic Podcast. If you'd like to find more episodes of the show, as well as articles and information about my one-on-one alignment coaching, then you can head to my website. It's simonjedrew.com. If you do have the means to support the show, then I'd love to see you in my Patreon community. Just go to patreon.com/simonjedrew, where you'll also get access to over 240 episodes recorded before 2020. But for now, enjoy the show. Hey everyone, thank you so much for spending your time here listening to the Practical Stoic Podcast. And today, I've got a wonderful conversation with a repeat guest, our good friend from Poland, none other than Piotr Stankiewicz. Now, Peter, as he's otherwise known as, so he is a philosopher, author, and promoter of Reformed Stoicism. He's the author of Does Happiness Write Blank Pages? On Happiness and Artistic Creativity, Manual of Reformed Stoicism, and other books. He writes in English and in Polish, and he's a member of the Modern Stoicism team. And he's based in Warsaw, Poland. Now, today we touch on all kinds of topics. We talk about creativity, we talk about social media, we talk about negative visualization, all things Stoicism. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. We're going to have him back on many, many more times. So enjoy this conversation with our good friend, Piotr Stankiewicz. We are practicing, by using Stoicism and philosophy in general, we're kind of practicing, especially when you take into account the Stoic idea of negative visualization.
Yes.
This rehearsal of, okay, terrible things can and will always happen to us.
Yes.
There's going to come a time when I'm going to really need this philosophy because the world is going to crush me. But then that's kind of a state that we want to get in, that the rest of the world is kind of forced into, right? And even outside of our own unique experience of being here and feeling as though we understand how to navigate these situations, it's like the next level that I see placed upon us as people interested in philosophy is like, how do you deal with the tragedies of life when it's not just heaped upon you, but when it's heaped upon every single person in the society? You know, like it's a macro issue now, and we might never have done the negative visualization to such a point where we looked at the potential of everybody being affected by something as opposed to just us, right?
That's a complex issue, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the question is that there are certain elements of this in this problem, because when you, on the one hand, when you at least usually when people, or at least speaking from my experience, when people try to do this negative visualization, it's kind of easier to, again, it's easier to imagine, it's easier to visualize these, very serious, very tragic, very grand scale events, right? Like wars, calamities, disasters, and so on, death, and so on. This is kind of the most obvious way to go. But on the other hand, has anyone imagined coronavirus before? Beforehand, people didn't really know. People didn't really know that this is something to be expected. And this is, of course, an epidemic is something very, very, very well versed in the tradition. Obviously, we have that in the ancient Stoics too, and it's kind of obvious. But still, I don't think it really that this negative visualization really helped with this one, because of this level of uncertainty. I believe it is. You can imagine, that you're dying or like the world ends, but this strange lockdown situation when you don't really know what to do or what not to do, it's not usually something. It's not something that you usually fear of. It's not something that you are afraid of. It's just this weirdness, this peculiarity of the situation is something that makes it really difficult. On the other hand, I believe if you this anyway social aspect that it affects all people, it is in a way it makes things easier, because you as the phrase goes, you will never walk alone here in COVID, right? You are never alone with this problem. There are numbers of other people who are also affected. The problem here, I believe, is more on the, in a way, political level, or kind of organizational level, that certain decisions and certain non-decisions made by governments and certain policies imposed and so on and so on and so on may seem, they're definitely out of control, and they may seem still confusing, unreasonable, irrational, and so on and so on. And that would be, speaking from my experience, that's kind of confusing and making things not so easy to deal with. On yet other level, just the final point with this one is that I believe that many people, you said that your audience reaches over to you saying that, yeah, thanks for getting us into philosophy and so on. I believe that this is very much a thing these days, not only for Stoicism, maybe not even mostly for Stoicism, but in general for certain philosophies of life, for purposeful living, for mindfulness, for meditation, for all others, always all different ways of trying to to live more consciously and in a more self-aware way. People do turn to that in the wake of COVID, and this is this is a bit of a silver lining, right? That people will probably try to live their lives more in a more self-aware way.
Yeah, that's it. You hope that what happens is, when something tragic does happen in the world, your philosophy steps up to the mark, the things that you've been learning, and actually obviously helps you in some small way to deal with it. And
yes,
and that really, I think that is the ultimate. I guess you could say it's the ultimate test of the validity of a certain worldview or philosophy. It's like, how does it help you in the time when you need it the most? And you can really, I guess, judge that by paying attention to yourself and to other people. Like, okay, well, you can. I think what was it? Was it the Enlightenment or the existentialist, I believe, view was. This could be completely wrong, was that your beliefs, your values aren't actually what you say. It's like how you live, it's how you act, right? So if I watch you and you're not actually living in congruency.
So this is Stoicism, first of all, not Enlightenment, not existentialism.
No, of course,
this is basically Stoicism.
But
this is from the Stoics.
That's it. And they were kind of like, yeah, everything is perspective, obviously, but like Epictetus said, show me your shoulders. I don't want to see your weights that you're using. I want to see what the weights are doing for you.
Exactly.
And
show me what you did in COVID. Yes, exactly.
And one thing that I think, just vibing once more on this idea of the negative visualization, one thing that I've been thinking about lately is exactly how far do we modern people actually take the idea of negative visualization? Because, I mean, you look at Seneca, and he writes pages upon pages, just going so deep into a negative visualization, talking about the burning of lions or lions. And he'll just go on for ages about how horrifying this is and how it will just destroy everything. And do we go that deep? Do we go so deep as to think about everything that could possibly happen to the extent that we can imagine that? Because, I mean, we forget really easily, right? Like, especially in Western culture and in relatively safe countries, we really forget what it means to be in a horrifying situation, when in reality, like, more than half the world is probably dealing with those sorts of things right now as we speak, And yeah, so sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to talk about negative visualization because I am personally I'm a big fan of it. This is one of my favorite Stoic techniques, and in the book on reform, in the manual of Reformed Stoicism, I believe I covered this. I have this feeling for this technique, and I analyze it deeply. And basically, I believe I wrote extensively on this particular problem that, on the one hand, the negative visualization is very helpful. There is no doubt about it. But on the other hand, there are many problems with it. And this is exactly what you're talking about. Sometimes, and the first world situation, that you are not accustomed to this actual level of danger or fear or hunger or whatever, and it's not and you have no personal experience, and it is kind of impossible to really actually visualize these bad things. So that's one problem. The other thing is sometimes you go sometimes you go too easy on yourself because you do not really have the capability to visualize the full extent of possible calamities. On the other hand, I believe it is possible to go too hard on yourself in a way that you visualize something which is so extremely and radically evil and unpleasant and kind of, very grave situation, that it is not really, that it turns out this is not really something you're afraid of because the probability is too low. So in a way that you go, and I believe I cited this example in the book, that you go to the doctor, there is this kind of exam, and you do the negative visualization, like saying, oh, it must be cancer, right, it will be the cancer, and then it turns out it's something unpleasant, like I don't know, like a stomach ulcer or something like that, something definitely unpleasant but nothing close to cancer. So you should be, by negative visualization, you should be okay, you should be happy. Oh, just this is something very little, but you are not, because you were kind of on a different orbit with this visualization. You instead of doing this in a genuine, candid fashion, you made it you turned it into a kind of an abstract, intellectual, play. So you can go too hard on yourself. In my case, I believe with negative visualization, it works best, and it works really well. And this is something I've been practicing for years, actually. And this was actually one of my first, Stoic principles, that when you have this kind of a closed situation, that it will go this way or that way, or three possibilities, or you go to a soccer match, and then you will your team will lose or it will win, right? So you visualize that you visualize the team winning, and then losing, and then you're either okay or you are positively surprised. So when there's a limited number of possible outcomes, it's kind of easier. It's kind of it goes well with me. It kind of instinctively I am able to think that way. But the problem is that in the real life, the possibilities are endless, and life is open. And what you're supposed to do then, kind of spend your day visualizing all the possible calamities, like COVID, like this or that, like a comet falling down on Earth, like everything. That makes no sense. That this is difficult. This is more difficult to me. And even if you try doing that, then you will never be able to you will still never be able to anticipate everything. And COVID is a perfect example, because no one really expected that.
Yeah. No, I think I see what you're trying to say. It's almost like making it just close enough that it actually makes sense to you, and just far enough that it actually pushes you to intellectually accept the fact that bad things will and can happen.
Yes,
right.
The problem of acceptance. When you do negative visualization, I think you need to do it in a way that it kind of, you, on some emotional and intellectual level, you kind of accept this as a real possibility. Because when you imagine something, when you visualize something which is way too bad, you're not thinking about it as a real possibility. So this is still this is difficult still. So yeah, but on the other hand, I wrote a book about Reformed Stoicism, so just for some balance. One idea from Orthodox Stoicism, from ancient Stoicism, that I believe is fair and good, is that we need to study, history and fates of other people, and we need to look back into the human lot, so that we know what might happen to us. And on these grounds, this is easier to predict that at some point an earthquake or an epidemic or something else will happen. On this way, I think the original view is quite okay.
Yeah, well, I think I'm kind of I might say I'm a student of Seneca's kind of approach when he talks about negative visualization, because he kind of,
and he's very good in that. Yes.
Yeah, and he kind of says, listen, you shouldn't just imagine what might happen. You should imagine every single thing you could possibly conceive would happen. And you're right. By learning from history, what I've found is that you start to get a sense that there is absolutely no end to the amount of terror that humans will inflict upon themselves, or that nature will inflict upon us, right? The further you go back in history, the more you see like, okay, I'm never going to get to the bottom of this. There's so much bad that could happen that has already happened. And I think that for me, it's less about getting specific examples of, like, I'm not trying to prophesy into the future necessarily and say, okay, COVID's coming soon. So that's, what I'm trying to do is settle myself with the fact that everything can and will happen. That's what infinity is, right? It's like,
yes.
There is no end to the imagination of nature to come up with ways to inflict upon us some sort of terrifying harm. And so if you can accept that, then it's like everything that happens, you just see it as, oh, okay, that's just another thing that was going to happen, whether or not I liked it. Here it is, and you can kind of focus on what you can focus on. But I think aside from the whole COVID issue, we talk about it a lot, obviously, because it's such a topical issue, and it's happening right now. But I thought that what would be really cool for us today is to dive into something, a topic that we have mutual interest in, which is kind of philosophy and art and creativity. For yourself, I mean, I actually want to get a kind of picture of your background as well. What was it that drew you to philosophy to start with, like starting from a young age? Like, when did you first jump into philosophy, and also when did you get interested in art and the kind of?
That's a serious question. That's far more serious than the COVID question. How can I even start? So, basically, when I so maybe let's start from the conclusion. The conclusion is that I wrote a book about Stoicism and artistic creativity, which kind of summarizes my investigation into the big problem of whether or not a Stoic or a person aspiring to be a Stoic can or cannot be at the same point a creative artist in this deep creative sense. Is there a problem there, or maybe maybe they can go together? And what kind of brought me to this issue is this, there is this stereotype that artists from various walks of life and from different arts, from literature, from all over, there is this stereotype that artists oftentimes, live lives which are not really stoical lives, right? That they are troubled, that they are tragic, that they are suffering, that they are in this or another way kind of, they have problems with dealing well with society, that they are condemned, they are cursed, they are they live, or at least they live in poverty. They do have certain problem with the world and with living well as a functional parts of the society. And this goes all the way. It's not just the stereotype about the Forever 27 Club or something like that, but it goes all the way back, at least to Plato, because as you can remember, Plato banned when he was conjuring up his ideal state. He, in his view, poets should be banned from this ideal state because they kind of don't fit in well. So there is this problem tracing back all the way to Plato. On the other hand, we have Amy Winehouse and all the other folks in rock and roll who kind of lived lives that are kind of very way away from what we usually think when we think about Stoicism, right? So is there a problem or not? Is this just kind of a shallow stereotype, or or maybe the problem is real? And I try. So in what I did is I tried to put a Stoic lens, so to speak, on this problem. I tried to analyze this big problem of cursed or tormented artists through Stoicism, which, in other words, turns out the question of whether or not an artist and the Stoic can be one and the same person. And I arrived, as usual in philosophy, to a complex and non-binary conclusion that in certain understandings of artistic creativity, it kind of goes well together, but in other understandings it does not. So there is no kind of very specific outcome, but the study itself is very insightful. But it is ambiguous, of course. But just to be more specific, this idea of tracing back at least to Romanticism in the early 19th century. The idea of romantic poet who is focused on always trying to establish something necessarily new, something which is an original work of art, something which is different from all other works of art, something which is his or her kind of very own, very private thing, and so on and so on. This romantic understanding of art here, the tension of Stoicism would be probably the greatest. For instance.
And is that
this answers the questions? This answers the question, I think, on some level, but on another level, it does not. So just feel free to follow up.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive a lot deeper into this. So
absolutely.
What is the I guess what is the incongruency between philosophy and art when it comes to the creation of something new? Is it almost kind of a fallout in the idea that really there is nothing new to create it, like that there is kind of that idea of there's nothing new under the sun? Does that play a role in this idea?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on. This is what I was about to say. But just for clarity, I am not talking about philosophy in general,
Stoicism,
art, Stoic philosophy and art. So yeah, this is one of the key points here. That if you want to, if you understand art or literature or creativity in general as creating something which needs to be new, something which needs to be on some deep level refreshing, opening up new vistas, new ways of understanding the world, creating a new alphabet to describe, not just describing the world, but describing the world in a new way, in a new fashion, and more than that, advancing a new alphabet, a new vocabulary to describe the world. If you understand creativity in this way, you will have the problem with the original Orthodox Stoic view, that exactly as you said, that there is nothing new under the sun, because as you know, the ancient Stoics believed in this idea of eternal return, which we can interpret and we can understand it in a number of ways. Some of us may want to understand that literally, some in a more abstract way, more as a metaphor, but the intention is clear, and this way or another, the world is in a way limited. The world is repeating itself. The world is on this level or that level, in this sense or in that sense, but it's kind of eternal revolution of one and the same thing, which kind of comes to pass and then and again and again and again. And if we believe in that worldview, then we have a problem, because we are not really able to create something radically new, because all the things that are here and that we are able to create already were in the past and will be in the future. So on this metaphysical level, there is a problem with that, because you either consider the world as nothing new under the sun and the eternal return, or you live by the promise of creating new ways to describe it.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly interesting about this kind of conundrum is that, of course, I absolutely agree that cycles are just constantly happening in humanity, and you can see that, and in the cosmos, it's just a never-ending flow of a repeating cycle. I think I heard it best put by Professor Joseph Siracusa on the show recently, and he said, when it comes to the history and cycles of humanity, the powerful people will always do what they can, and the weaker people will always do what they must, right? That's the way that he put it. It's just kind of like this repeating cycle.
That's it's
an interesting way to look at it.
It's very political, but that's a fine one-liner. I will remember that. It's not.
Well, he is a professor of diplomacy, so he is from that political kind of lens. But when it comes to art, what I think is really interesting about art is so much of it, yes, tells these kind of archetypal stories of humanity, but from a different perspective. And that's what's really interesting about it. And even like you and I take philosophy and say, or take Stoicism and say, well, their perspective back then was kind of this and that, but our perspective now, we can kind of change it a little bit to tweak it to our own view of the world. That's kind of what I see art doing as well. It's from where I stand, here's what everything looks like. Does that kind of make sense?
I'm not really sure how can I... it makes sense to me, but I'm not sure if it makes sense from the Stoic perspective. I'm kind of a bit confused with this one. That's not the way I usually visualize it, to use that word one more time. But if we do get back to the one thing is that the question here is that one of the questions here is that how do we want to read the ancient Stoics? Do we want to stick to the original doctrine, or do we want to allow some latitude, or in my case even a reformation? So this is the thing, that for certain interpretations of Stoicism, certain things will work, and for certain they won't. And there are, I believe, some deep principles that would be very difficult to overcome from this artistic point of view. So that would be my response here. But
would you almost say that it's not necessarily as if we're taking the philosophy and trying to add something new to it, as much as we are trying to let the dead wood burn off until we're left with only the bare essentials of exactly what we need in a philosophy?
That's based on the premise that there is some essentials that do not change. That there's something that will be left, and that's not. I'm not sure if it is the case. In my view, I mean, it may work. It may work for some people. I think my perspective is that you need to. You not necessarily have to kind of consider what's essential and what's not essential, but you should try it out in practice. It is practice of life. It is your own conduct and your own, your own practice that in a way decides what's essential for you. For someone else, it may be something different, and therefore I think about Stoicism, and I teach Stoicism this kind of, in a way, loose way, that there is a number of principles, there is a number of this kind of spiritual techniques that you may want to organize your life around, like negative visualization, right? Which I do like very much. Then the idea of eternal return, which I do not like, and so on and so on. But it is in a way your own practice that decides. And the bottom line is that it will differ from one person to another. And getting back to the problem of art, I think that this romantic artist who is very much into exploring the irrational, exploring the emotional and spontaneous part of his or her soul, they will have a big problem with finding anything in Stoicism essential, right? That would be the case here.
And touching on your own creativity,
yes,
I'd like to know, because obviously you write a lot, and how do you, within your own mind, I guess you might say, summon or sift through and find creativity in your own pursuits, and how does that work alongside your philosophy or with Stoicism for you?
Okay, so yeah, you like 20 minutes ago, you asked about my background, and I didn't say anything about my background in this particular regard. So now we're getting back to it. And in my case, art is basically, and creativity is literary creativity. It is writing, because I do not write only books on Stoicism. I write, essays and other things. So in my particular case, with me, it is creativity through words and through MS Word and through writing. So this is this particular. When I was younger, I tried to write poems, obviously, and so on, so on. So in this way or another, but literature, expression through words, and literary creativity. Now, when it comes to Stoicism, there's this weird thing, and I believe we might have touched upon this when we spoke previously, or maybe we didn't. But the weird thing is that I feel that I feel the best with my Stoicism. I feel my Stoic powers the best. I feel most empowered as a Stoic when I'm writing or otherwise teaching Stoicism. So it is a kind of weird thing that in my case, Stoicism, writing about Stoicism and trying to express these ideas, and trying to maybe not even express, but kind of apply these ideas through writing to certain new subjects, new topics, new problems that life comes up with, like COVID or like other things. When I sit down and I'm writing about it, then it works best for me. So the best way to in some weird way, the best way to practice Stoicism and to kind of empower myself in Stoicism is to try to pass it on to others. So this is very, very weird. It is a bit paradoxical, because theoretically you should be at your Stoic best, so to speak, when you're practicing Stoicism, doing these things and so on and so on. But in my case, this personal experience with Stoicism is intertwined since 2010 with writing on Stoicism and teaching Stoicism. So it kind of works best when I'm trying to write something about Stoicism. So, and I believe, for example, it was a case of Seneca. I mean, in the writings of Seneca, you can trace this same kind of a problem that that he was a Stoic in the most fully when he was preaching Stoicism, and I can relate to that. This is something I can relate to, and now this is linked in a very curious and very direct way to the theoretical stuff I work with in the book on creativity and Stoicism, because one of the points how when I was pondering how you can merge these two, how these two can work together, Stoicism and creativity, was that if you understand artistic creativity or creativity in general as a way to teach, as a way to pass on ideas to other people, then you can perfectly, it works good with Stoicism. There is no theoretical obstacle to that. And there are quotes in the ancient Stoics that they would approve. That if you kind of dress an idea in a proper melody that rings well, or in a proper wording, that it can be passed on in a more fluent way. So I believe the ancients would agree with that. So on some level, I reached a bit of coherency. But again, as an author, as not just a practicing Stoic, but also a guy who is writing about Stoicism, it's a very peculiar position to be in.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, this idea that Stoicism is best practiced when you're trying. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because it's like when you're forced into a position to say, okay, well, now I actually have to explain this idea to somebody else, and I have to teach it to somebody else. I mean, in order to teach something, you kind of have to really understand the principle, right? And you have to play around with it, and
you have to really kind of think it again. You don't. It's not just a script that you're following. With other things I teach, I have notes somewhere here. For example, that I mentioned, it's more like you have a certain script, and you just you say certain things, and you do it on an intellectual level. With Stoicism, it goes deeper. You need to really engage with that in order, or not, maybe the other way about. If you are trying to honestly, in a candid way, if you're trying to express to tell others how all this works, then it engages with you, it captures you again, and you're again, I'm a Stoic, and it gets you yet another time. But again, remember that you do podcasts on Stoicism. I write about Stoicism, and it is a very particular position. It won't be the same for everyone, which goes back to what I said before, that the essentials will differ from one person to another.
And I guess that's essentially a question of to what extent is it necessary for you to be teaching these ideas, and how far do you go in your efforts to teach those ideas? Like, if you bring it right back to a very broad level, like one of my favorite ideas from this personal development leader from the 80s and 90s, Jim Rohn. One of my favorite ideas that he taught was, if you get a really good idea or a good principle or a good value, go and share it with like 10, 20 people. And the reason why you want to share those ideas is because if you share it with 20 people, they'll hear it once from you, but you hear it 20 times, which means that slowly it's like seeping into your mind, right?
Yes, exactly. That's this is what I perfectly agree. It's exactly what I intended to say, that you hear it again and again, and because you are the one who is saying it, you cannot not hear it. You won't be deaf to it. You will, on some deeper level, you will engage with that. And this is exactly that you will hear it 20 times. This is exactly the thing. So this works for me, and it works for I believe with my books on Stoicism. This is the case. Yes.
And you know what I've also found, Peter, is that as I share these ideas, and you've probably found this as well. Obviously, as we continue to read, as we continue to learn, our mind, our consciousness is expanded to embody, or to encapsulate, all the new ideas that we gain. And then what you do when you go out into culture and you learn about art and you learn about history and psychology and philosophy and all these different things, you gain a broader understanding of the world, right? And as you keep on sharing these ideas, what also happens for me is especially I've found this is if I share an idea a month from now, my perspective on that idea is going to be different than my perspective would be on that idea now. Because a month from now, I'm not thinking about the specific idea from this perspective. I'm thinking about it with 1 month of new information, new knowledge, new wisdom. And so what I've found is that the more I share, I do find that I'm brought into alignment with a more firm and I guess a deeper understanding of these ideas of what is good and also what I can throw away, because I think that it's so important that we talk to each other, we share these ideas, because if I share it 20 times, 10 people might disagree with me wholeheartedly.
Yes.
And they might share with me like, oh, no, I think you're wrong in this place. And then because I shared it, I am going to receive that information back, and that's going to feed back into my own, I guess, worldview. So it kind of refines what you learn as well. It's not like a fixed process.
Yes, refines what you learn. Yes, that's a yeah. I would basically agree. What I can add is that in a way that it is what's important to me, but this refers not only to Stoicism but to to your intellectual life in general, is that it is in a way good, because I'm a person who my in a way natural tendency as a person, just this kind of particular bent of my own mind, is that I have this tendency to to study a book, to go deep into something, to make a lot of notes and to analyze from this perspective, that perspective, read another book, and so on, kind of study something very deeply, but in a way in private. That I do not have this kind of natural tendency to share with others, and I can become very knowledgeable about a certain particular problem or topic, but people won't be aware of that. There's this kind of level of privacy here, and it is not good, because living in a way more openly with your ideas, like sharing it more easily and talking about them, just as you mentioned in the quote with 20 guys, it's from my perspective is healthier, and I need more and more of that. And in my case, you asked about my background, so this plays to that. In my case, on some level, Stoicism was the way to kind of break out from this habit of kind of keeping things to myself. And from the time when I first published the book, when I got more outgoing on social media, writing about Stoicism, the here and there and so on, it kind of created this habit of considering my ideas more openly, more socially, that even if I do not agree with something, I analyze this in this piece, in that post, and so on and so on. And it's kind of better, healthier, and at least in my case. And this refers to social media. So you can you can say a ton of bad things about social media, and most of them will be true, that they're distract us, and that bad things happen, people hate each other because of social media, political divisions, and so on and so on and so on. But and there is a check mark in the plus column. One positive thing that can be said about social media is that, from my perspective, they in a way invite you to be more open about things that you think about, your own ideas, and they kind of invite you to go out and share them. And in my case, I think it worked quite well, and I made certain development through sharing, right? So yeah.
Yeah, well, it kind of takes a couple of layers. I can see what you're saying. It kind of takes a couple of layers off I guess the complexity of trying to share an idea, because I mean, one of the reasons why there's so many negative comments on social media, for example, is because people don't. When you're not in front of somebody, you're not worried about them punching you in the face if you have a bad idea, right? But it's also such a great way to share information as well, which is I guess where we're headed. But one thing I wanted to ask about is, so
can I say one more thing?
Yes,
one more thing here before we move on, because this links to the problem of creativity, because you said that social media, that's a way to share your information, and I would go in further. It's not just about sharing information, but it's also about testing things. That if you for example, I believe in the earlier this year, like in January or February, I wrote like three different pieces, kind of month by month, about about how to. It was about kind of organization of how you should organize your work, how to boost productivity, how to organize your to-do list so that it works good for you. I had this. I don't remember the specifics even today, but I had this very strong New Year resolution that I will do this in a certain fashion. I wrote a piece about that. It was published 2 weeks ago. I wrote a new piece, an update to that, which was complete. I reversed myself completely, because in practice it turned out it will be better in a completely different manner. A month later, I wrote something yet different on the same topic, and it was genuine. It was real, trying to test certain things and then tell that to people, and people are interested. I have this following, and people do read that, so it works for you. It works well in a way that you live, as I said, you live more openly with your ideas and you express them. And the problem of expression, like with artistic creativity, that it is important that you express certain ideas, certain intuitions, certain considerations, even if they are not perfect, even if they are not yet fully mature. Because if you do not do that, they will kind of block you. They will not leave room for new things, new ideas to come. So on some level, this works quite well. Of course, this is not to praise social media. This is not to, this is not to reject all the bad things that happen over there. But there are certain, in my case, there were certain healthy things that I acquired that way. Okay, now getting back to your new question, of course.
Well, no, it's on a similar vein when it comes to this discussion, because I'm wondering, how has the kind of cosmopolitan worldview played a role in your decisions to write books and be creative and share these ideas? Because it seems like Stoicism is, it has almost a very evangelical is the wrong word, but it has kind of like a proselyting kind of strain through it. It's kind of like, hey, these ideas are so good and so useful that they're not just for yourself. You want to help other people to come under the umbrella of Stoicism so that they can also receive the benefits, and you can influence more and more people around the world to live happier lives, right? Does cosmopolitanism play a role in your decision to teach these ideas?
That's a very good question. And I know it's a very good question, but because I don't have a good answer. I don't have a fair, straightforward answer right now. Does it play? I believe that there is a lot of empowerment in Stoicism, that it can help people in difficult life situations, and it can help in a lot of very diverse hardships and diverse difficult situations. And this in a way links to what we said like an hour ago about the first world problem, that we in the safe countries, in relatively wealthy countries, we do not know what danger is, we do not know what war is, and so on and so on and so on. But in a way, through Stoicism, because obviously Stoicism can help you, it was of course to some extent the case in my case. It can help you deal with your own, certain mental confusions and certain psychological problems. It can help, sort out certain problems that you have with yourself. And the thing is that other people who have different problems, very often radically different problems, and very often much worse problems. So on some level, it is weird to teach in a way that you're saying to how to deal with certain problems. If you say that to a person who is who has it much worse than you, because those and this is, I believe, the modern sensibility has it that it is impossible to translate these experiences. But the magical thing about Stoicism is that I see that happening with when I talk to people and when when people write to me and so on, that it somehow allows us to translate these experiences and these struggles. That maybe I struggle with, let's say, depression or with writer's block or something like that, I can express, I can write about how I dealt with it stoically, and someone else can pick it up and they might have far more serious, objectively, definitely much more life-changing, life-threatening problems and much deeper stuff. And they may still be able to, through Stoic magic, they might be able to learn from something, even though on the level of kind of plain life and concrete facts, I should be the one learning from them. But Stoicism gives, in a way, a platform on which people can, in a way, share their experiences and their struggle in this kind of non-threatening, in a way, easygoing way. And this is in some way how I understand Stoic cosmopolitanism, and this idea that we are never alone, that if you suffer from something, you will always find other people who suffer. You will always find other people who are miserable, and these may be different kinds of misery, but it is still humankind, so to speak. We are all in this together, and through Stoicism we can get a grasp on that. This is how I understand it.
I think that's an interesting perspective. Obviously, it would be naive to think that we are the beginning and ending of all suffering in ourselves. There's so many ways that we could be hurt that we haven't been hurt yet, and that other people are being hurt. And I think that's an interesting perspective, that if what I'm hearing is correct, that Stoicism almost gives us, like you said, a platform on which we can all say, listen, we all understand that everybody's suffering in a big way, but here are a few ideas that will share common ground between all of us that can help us to, withstand whatever suffering it is that we specifically are dealing with, right?
Yeah, this is the way to go. This is the line here. Yeah, that's what I think.
And I'd really love, Peter, if I could delve into your own specific writing process, because I think what interests me most about your kind of view of creativity and mixing that with Stoicism is how do you yourself combine the two, Stoicism and and creativity in order to manifest the ideas that you're trying to get across in the most effective way. Like when you have writer's block, how does Stoicism get you through it? You know, when you, like that sort of stuff.
So one way to answer is that I mean, I don't really have writer's blocks. Usually, I don't. I think it's easy for me to write. I don't have a block often. It's a way. It's a not good way to answer, because it's kind of condescending on other people who deal with that. But in my case, if I'm to be speaking frankly, I don't have writer's block often. It's usually more kind of it's always a bit of a struggle, but the block is not really something I have to deal with very often. If you ask me how is that possible, how can that happen, the honest question is I don't know. One point I can make is that I always know what I want to write before I sit down to write it. I always think before I write. I always have this ideas I want to express. I do have them in my mind before I sit down to the computer. If I did it the other way, if I just sat down and started, writing, I would have a block, obviously. But I kind of consciously, after years in this trade, I know that I need to have when I drive or when I do some workout, I think about what I'm supposed to write the following day, and then I just sit down and I develop this idea. There's I have a few lines in my mind, and I turn them into pages. So that's if someone wants advice, then this is my advice. Now, getting to the real question you ask is that I think that at least it's still like 50% of what I write, maybe 40%, but I believe it's half and half. So half of what I write is still about Stoicism. So to this half, you want to apply what we discussed before. That when I write about Stoicism, when I think about Stoicism, when I think about what to write, I teach myself Stoicism still. I let it kind of capture and grasp me one more time. And this is specifically the answer to your question. When it comes to the other half, when I write things that are non-Stoic, then that's a wild thing. I believe that there is, and this is again something I explore in the book on Stoicism and artistic creativity. There is this great healing power in the process of writing and in the process of openly and candidly trying to express yourself. There's a great healing power in it, and it's comparable to Stoicism. But of course the question is whether or not it is a Stoic process, and if there are some interpretations that it is, there are certain interpretations that these two diverge. But if you apply the practical, this kind of very, in a way, a liberal interpretation, and the practical interpretation is that if it works for you, then it is okay, right? If it makes you healthier, then why not doing it? And in a way, I admit that I might be not a Stoic in the process of writing, in this process of expression, but it makes me feel. It still makes me feel better, and it doesn't make me feel worse if I accept that it was not fully a Stoic process.
But don't you think that the writing process has really been adopted by modern Stoicism as exactly what you're saying, a vehicle for, I guess you could say, personal enlightenment, personal knowledge, because like you say, you sit down and you write, and a lot of people do journaling, and they get the same values when
it comes to journaling, that would be basically Stoic thing, right? Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, they were a journal diary however you want to call that, which kind of serve this purpose of self-medication, of autotherapy, of self-healing. So, and this is very well versed into the tradition, and this is a perfectly Stoic thing. The most interesting questions about these types of writing, these ways of artistic expressions, which are not stoical per se. The question is whether or not they are in a way Stoic in the process of writing them, and this is basically a question I study in the book with interesting outcome, but no definite conclusion.
Yeah,
but also, if I can say something yet else, the thing is that I in this scope of Stoic authors, I believe I am a bit of an exception in the sense that usually when I think about the Stoic authors, you most in many cases you'll have guys who kind of turn to Stoicism and then write about Stoicism only, and they are kind of exclusive about that. I started my my first book, second book was about Stoicism, but it's not the only one and only topic I'm writing about. So and I do have a practice about that, right? It was a tenet, it was a premise from day one that I had in mind, that I never wanted to write on Stoicism only. It was always intended to be a part of my endeavors and of my and of what I do, and I feel I can do that. It's not a problem for me. And this would be the answer. It's not a problem for me personally, because somehow I learned to through experience. I learned how to do that, and I'm in what I write, I'm of course trying to, and in this podcast also, in this interview, I'm trying to share my experiences. But you never know how it will work with others. I can only hope that is to their best.
And something that I think that you're very, very good at, Peter, is obviously, I agree that there's a lot of people.
Thank you in advance.
Well, there's a lot of people just writing about Stoicism as in, kind of like a research project, going back and say, okay, well, what did the Stoics think? But you're coming along and saying, okay, let's take what the Stoics thought, let's overlay it over our current existence in our modern society. And what are we going to take? What are we going to leave? And this might be my final question, actually. Like, how do you effectively read the Stoic texts and stop yourself from being drawn into the ideology of Stoicism and instead look to, I guess, sift out the best knowledge? So a lot of people can read these texts, and like I did at the start, definitely, and in many ways probably still do. You read these texts and it almost becomes like your Bible, and you just accept everything that they say, right? How do you stop yourself from becoming that kind of writer?
Again, I don't have that problem at all, because this was again one of my key premises from the day I started researching Stoicism, which was like 15 years ago or 14 years ago. That I don't want to be that kind of a guy. I knew it from the outset. It was kind of obvious for me. It was my own principle from the very beginning, that I never wanted to be a guy who just researches Stoicism. I never want to be a guy who treats it as a Bible. I always wanted to. My whole challenge, my whole interest in it was based on the idea that I want to apply it not only to these two layers, not only to my own life, but also to the 21st century, to the time we live in. That I want to confront it not only with the hardships and problems, depression, psychological problems, and whatever in my own life, but also the realities, the problem, challenges, social, political, and others in our own time. But this is what I think makes Stoicism most interesting. And this is just the way I was thinking from the outset. This was my whole approach from the beginning. And this is, I believe, again, what makes Stoicism relevant, vivid, and still inspiring. Even if we, as in Reformed Stoicism, in my case, even if we oftentimes diverge quite seriously from the orthodox original line. This is not about any blind following. This is about open conversation and perpetual confrontation with new problems, new ideas, new technological advancements, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this was the long answer. The short answer is that I knew I don't have the problem, because I knew from day one that I don't want to do this. I don't want to be just the researcher in Stoicism.
And I think what really sticks out to me with that answer is this idea of perpetual confrontation with new ideas, because that's what we are. I mean, we're all just wandering through this world of ideas and things and happenings and cognitive processes, and there's always going to be new things that come, or not new things, but I guess you could even say a repeating effect, or like, what was it? I think somebody said it was like history doesn't repeat itself, but it mimics itself. It's like an echo. So there's always going to be kind of new things coming our way that are kind of reiterations of old things. But what we're supposed to do, like you suggest, is to look at it not as a Bible, not as a religion, but as a set of ideas to be wrestled with, you might say.
Yeah, but we need to remember, on the other hand, there is this question of, we live in 2020, and it is a time of quite severe and very profound and kind of world-changing technological and scientific advancement, which is kind of unfathomable for many. And this opens a very serious question whether or not the world is simply repeating itself, and as you mentioned, as you said, echoing and mimicking itself, or maybe there is something, after all, really new under the sun. This is an open question, and as Stoics, if you want to be real Stoics, we need to confront ourselves with this question and the next question, and so on. Just as we said before, Stoicism is not a closed book. You need to try to apply it to your own life, to perpetually confronted with the problems you have in your own life. So therefore, I believe it is in the Stoic spirit to say that we need to confront it with the global challenges and with the changes in the world, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Well, Peter, I think that's a perfect place to kind of end the interview. Wrestle with these ideas, put them up against your current worldview, against your current, challenges that you're dealing with. That is where this philosophy shines best, is when it's put to use against your current life.
Or in another expression, you can say that is the only place when it shines well. That this is the only place when Stoicism can be put to test.
Heck yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. If this is the proper point.
Of course. No, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. If you'd like to sign up for email updates, join my Patreon meetup groups that we hold weekly, or if you'd like to offer feedback or suggestions for future guests or topics on the show, then you can head to simonjedrew.com. There you'll also find information about how we can work one-on-one together with my alignment coaching, based around the philosophical principles found in Stoicism. Finally, if you are on Facebook, then I'd love to see you in our group, the Practical Stoic Mastermind. But hey, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you next time.